I think if my Worlds was in Europe or in America in the middle of their season, it would have been completely different. I was just lucky that it was in Peru, so it was more of my summer than their summer. And I think it gave me that sniff, it gave me that, chance to get a medal. And then after getting that, and after being so upset by not getting it, that really fueled me to make sure I was never in that position again, that I never had to rely on somebody else crashing or somebody else stuffing up for me to get a medal.
Hello, and welcome back or welcome to the Waterski Podcast. This is Matteo, your host, and the goal of the Waterski Podcast is and always will be to promote the sport of water skiing. My favorite sport, most likely your favorite sport. I hope you got to ski some today as you're listening to this episode, and if not, I certainly hope you get to do some turns, some tricks, some jumps, whatever it is that you enjoy on the water. I hope you get to do it as soon as possible. Now, speaking of jumps, I had the true privilege, I must say, to interview Jacinta Carroll for this episode, and the second part of this interview will come out next week. You know, sometimes in sports, someone comes along that just dominates and redefines what a sport is like, or at least the preconception of what that sport was like up until that point. And in my humble opinion, there's nobody on the water right now that did such as Jacinta did. She hasn't lost an event in 9 years. And I'm just going to say it again. She hasn't lost an event in 9 years. That means that in the last 9 years, if she was on the dock, she won. Not only that, but she broke the 60-meter barrier, and more recently, she broke the 200-foot barrier. I was just so curious to understand her journey and what led to the most dominant jump skier of all time. And I had heard bits of it, must have read maybe some of the interview on print that she did in the past, but certainly I enjoyed listening to the amount of detail and the challenges she had to go through to be able to ski and to train at the level that she needed to train, at the intensity that she needed to train to become the jumper that she wanted to be. Now, obviously, we also talk a lot about Ray Stokes, and the role that he had in her skiing, the role that their coach-athlete relationship had on her. And I think it comes across clearly the effect that this coach-athlete relationship had on him also. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this first part. Second part will come out next week, where Jacinta will talk about the most recent world record and some other things that I sort of query her and ask for advice and ideas about jumping. That will come out next week. But for now, enjoy the first part of my interview with Jacinta Carroll. Jacinta, welcome to the Waterski Podcast. I know it's super early in the morning for you and it's kind of late-ish at night for me. I'm sure it's going to work just fine. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, no,
yeah, well, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Look, I have a question that I ask to every single guest, which is, how'd you get into water skiing? Although I gotta say that I was fortunate enough to have seen at least the wear, the only time that I came to Australia. But sorry, go ahead. Well, how did you get into skiing?
Yeah, so the Weir is in Geelong, Victoria, which a lot of pro skiers know as a very good preparation site for Moomba because it's very, very rolly and very, very windy all of the time. So I grew up just outside of Geelong in a really small country suburb called Conwaree. And my parents had a little outboard boat just as like a social boat. And my dad's actually a sandblaster and spray painter. And the local ski club, the boat ramp was covered in slime, and they employed him to go down and basically pressure wash and sandblast the boat ramp. And the next day they were having a Christmas party, and they knew that my dad was into skiing, so they was like, hey, why don't you bring your three kids along? And I have two older brothers, and I was 9 at the time, I think, and we rocked up and we won every single competition for the day. So it was egg and spoon races, it was three-legged races, it was who could eat a bowl of ice cream without their hands and no spoon the fastest. And my dad felt really guilty because there was 20 other kids there and his 3 kids are winning everything. So, and we weren't even members. So he joined us as members, but he was actually too embarrassed for us to take our boat down there. So our family project for the winter was my dad bought a bit of a shell of a boat, a hull, and an engine, and that was positioned in our shed at home. And for the whole winter, the 3 kids and my dad, we rebuilt it. So my dad refiberglassed the whole thing, redid the engine, and our first boat was called Swamp Donkey. And we skied behind that, and we're just fortunate enough that the local ski club down there has ski schools once a month. I think it's every 4th or 3rd Sunday. And the volunteers come down and coach you. And whether they thought we had talent or whether they saw a cash cow in my dad, one of the coaches said, oh, listen, Dougie, your kids are quite talented and picking this up really quickly. And, I think they should do a competition. So my brother went to his first competition, and me and my middle brother, we sat and watched because we weren't, I sucked. I couldn't get up on one, I was stuck on 2 skis type thing. So my brother went and slalomed. And then that afternoon, we borrowed a kid's trick ski and went to the local big open lake and all learned how to get up on a trick ski mid-competition. So then my brother could compete in tricks the next day.
Okay. And how old were you at this time?
So by the time we built the boat and actually joined the ski club, I was 10. So I did my first competition when I was 10 years old, I think in January. And then lucky for me, sub-juniors, which is under 10 and under, at the time in Australia, it was boys and girls combined. And you didn't need a slalom rating because it was the first time they were actually letting under 10 slalom, because before that they were banned, you could only trick. So you had to trick 100 points to be rated in trick, and all you had to do was get up in slalom. So I ran a pass in slalom, and I'm like, oh, well, what's the qualification for nationals? And they're like, oh, we don't know, so go to nationals type thing.
Okay.
So yeah, my first nationals as a 10-year-old, it was me, Josh Bryant, Tim Bradstreet in the one category.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, because obviously sub 10, it was all kind of like co-ed, boys and girls.
Yeah, it was boys and girls combined, and typically the girls would probably be better at trick and the boys would be better at slalom.
Yeah. Yeah. Classic. A bit of, earlier strength for the boys. What was your recollection of those days? Was it just something fun to do? Were you already like, I want to win, I want to do competition? Like, what was the vibe for you in those early days?
It was definitely fun to start with. So we had a big old school bus that my dad had tore out all the seats and renovated into like an RV, and it was parked full time at a lake that was about 2 hours from home. And we just social skied. We would get up every morning, go for a barefoot, and then we'd chuck the crab pots in, and then we'd knead wood and we'd muck around, and then we'd get the crab pots out and cook lunch and dinner. It was just fun. And then when my brother went to a competition, I was like, well, why does he get to do this? I don't want to sit down and watch. And then it really just took off from there. As a little country kid, especially being the youngest, you don't want to let your older brothers beat you. So I think it was more of got that competitive thrill of wanting to do what my older ones were doing and wanting to be the same as them, I guess.
Yeah, so certainly like looking up to someone older, wanting to do the same. That sort of like
Yeah,
younger sibling dynamic. Yeah.
yeah. And in that
So,
first few years, we definitely still social skied a lot. Yes, we started to compete, but we would still go away on family holidays to that lake and barefoot and tube, and we would still go up on a houseboat and muck around. We still social skied a lot in the first few years.
now, was it, because I guess like in the off season, were you doing other sports, or was it just type of skiing and that's it?
No, like obviously you've been to Geelong before Moomba and it's not the warmest place. Um,
Right.
so I think there was one winter only ever in my whole career of living in Geelong that I skied through winter. The rest of the time we would stop. So our national championships every year are on the Easter 4 day break. So we
Yeah.
would pack up our ski gear and we wouldn't ski again, potentially at least until October or November. So what we would do is AFL football. My brothers played. I played that as well. I played netball. All the school sports you could think of. All three of us at one point were in the same basketball team after school. So we were doing absolutely every and any sport we could, and we didn't think about skiing until the next summer because
Hmm.
as a 11, 12, 13-year-old kid, you don't want to be in the freezing cold water through the middle of winter when you can be with your friends playing netball and getting to go to the school canteen and getting hot chips. Like, so we just did a lot of sports, like a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Was that encouraged from your family or just something that within the school system, you know?
A bit of both. The high school we went to, my brother being the oldest of the three, got to basically choose which high school we all went to. And it was more of like a tech college because he was very trade inclined. So it had the first year I started there, actually, they started a sports excellence program, which was perfect, and they'd built a gym. So at that point in time, I was really big into my netball and, going, trialing out for rep teams and so forth. But they were really supportive with the water skiing as well.
Okay.
Um, kind of. So yeah, it was supported by both my parents. They wanted us to not be skiing in the winter. Hell, they didn't want to sit in the boat and freeze in Geelong.
Right.
But they also wanted us to have a variety of sports.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Upbringing, three kids always moving around essentially. Like there was very
Yeah,
little still time.
yeah, very busy. The good thing is, I guess, with our regional community, the football and netball clubs are generally associated with each other. So my brother would be playing football on the football field 150 meters away from where I was playing netball. And
Okay.
my dad would be umpiring the game or helping coach the game, and my mum would be coaching or helping with the netball game. So it was everybody get in the car on a Saturday and go to the football netball together.
So it's cool this because obviously we always talk about water skiing as that sort of family sport, and it sounds like for you the fact that you were doing a lot of skiing related things behind the boat early on, that sounds like it fits the description. But it's cool that also in the other sports, dad was judging, mom was coaching, like you had all these like I guess, involvement of family beyond. So that tells me, maybe I might be wrong, but it tells me that your family really valued physical activity. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, definitely. We just, like, if you were to ask me to name a Disney movie or say a quote from a Disney movie, I'd have no idea. Absolutely
Hmm.
no,
Hmm.
because we didn't grow up sitting inside watching TVs. We grew up mucking around in the backyard, and always we had a local tennis court 200 meters from our house. So we'd walk up the road and play tennis or basketball or BMX. Like we were always just outside doing sport. And I think my parents, especially like my mum, she was that parent that would pick up 7 kids, 6 of them not even her own, from school in the afternoons and drive them to the basketball court to go play their basketball, or to
Yeah.
drive them up to Melbourne an hour and a half away to go in a tournament. Like she was that mum. So I guess I'm really privileged in the sense that they really valued us being in teams and being in sports, and supported us to do that rather than, oh, come home, little Johnny, here's your iPad, you can sit on the couch and, or sit
Right.
on your phone or sit in front of the TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I might be biased, but I think it's a perfectly awesome upbringing. That
Yeah,
who
yeah, it's
cares
pretty
about the
good.
Disney movies? So when, or better, how long did the two sort of like halves of your year went on before you sort of decided, okay, I need to find a way to ski more often or through the winter or like.
Yeah, so my brother got good pretty quickly. So when he was within a year and a half of us competing, well, not even in a year of us competing, he got selected to go to the Junior Worlds in Florida at Corey's. I think that was 2006 or 7. No, before that, that was 2005. I think when the hurricane hit It was actually at Jack's, and he
Actually, I
trained at
was there.
Corey's.
I was
Yeah,
a junior
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, so my brother was reserved for that, and I guess that kind of gave us our first little sniff of, oh, should we be taking this serious? Like he's done it for a year and he's already reserved in the team. And then in the following team that went to France, my brother was in the team and I was reserve. So I guess at that point we really thought, oh, we should probably be putting a bit more time and attention into this. Um, so we used to travel. We'd stop skiing in Geelong in April, and then in Australia you have 2 weeks off at school in June, July, and two
Mhm.
weeks off of school in September. So we would all either get in the car or on a plane and fly to Port Macquarie to a lake called Stony Park,
Mhm.
and we would train there for the 2 weeks. Obviously, we hadn't done much skiing, but it was just kind of a way for us to keep in touch with the sport.
Mhm.
Um, and then leading into my first Junior Worlds, which was 2009 in Peru. So that was a January event. As soon as school finished for the year, I think it was mid-November, I took the last week off. I flew up to Stony Park and I stayed there for 5 weeks training. And then I was obviously faced with the situation of being there on Christmas. And my dad called me, and basically the situation was, I don't have enough money to fly you home for Christmas and then back to Stony Park to train. So you either fly home and spend Christmas with the family and with Nana, and then we fly from here to Peru and you haven't trained for 10 days, or you stay there for Christmas. So at 16, sitting in a cabin by yourself on Christmas Day is pretty daunting. But it's just one of the little sacrifices I had to do because otherwise I wouldn't have got to train until that Junior World. So it was probably around that 15, 16 mark that I started having to make those sacrifices of not attending some of the other sports as much, and training a lot more. And don't get me wrong, like when we were doing other sports, like we were still in the gym and we were still doing that type of training to help our skiing. We just weren't physically on the water because like I say, it's too cold. The England people are like, hey, that's like our summer.
Right. Right.
But we just felt like we've got other sports to do. We don't need to be skiing in the cold.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, right around that, like you as a family, because so far again, it's you as a family start to understand that there's a higher level that it's attainable, and obviously you have to work hard, but you get those opportunities, and so the sacrifice component comes into play, which I didn't quite get it. Did you decide to stay at Stony's at the Christmas?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had, which was fine. Like I had obviously the morning by myself, but as of lunchtime, I went up to Jason Stone, who runs Stony Park. Went up to his house with his parents, and I at the time to basically like afford my skiing was his nanny, so looking after his little kids. So I had Christmas Day with them, and it ended up being fine. And then I met my mum in Sydney Airport, and she flew with me to Peru. My dad couldn't come because we couldn't afford for both parents to pay for airfares to come.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was your first worlds, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
So Australia tracksuit, flag, let's go and represent the country. How did it go?
yeah, awesome. Like I remember I was training and I wasn't even ranked in the top 10, but I'd improved a lot. But no one really knew me, right? Because I was
Yeah.
from Australia. And I remember like the week before flying out, and she'll probably laugh at this now, but I got this Facebook request of Lauren Morgan. And to me, Lauren Morgan was like her and Carolyn Hensley, like they were the kings of junior girl sport, right?
Right.
And I was like, oh, like Lauren wants to be my friend. She doesn't even know me.
Hmm.
And like one of the first messages she asked was, so how are you jumping? And I was like, oh, okay, like this is interesting. And anyway, so I flew over there and I jumped really well. I PB'd in the first round, and I tricked well, slalomed pretty average, but that's slalom for me. And I remember I was ranked fourth coming into the final day. So I was fourth last off the dock, and I went out there and jumped another PB. I jumped 42.9 meters. And the next girl off the dock was Manon Costard. And like, I was, I think, 15, 16, and Manon was top age. And I was like tiny compared to her. I was like, who are these people and where are they from,
Right.
And Manon beat me by 10 centimeters.
Oh,
And I
okay.
started crying. And all I thought was, oh my gosh, my parents have worked so hard to afford to send me here, and I've let them down because I'm not going to medal. I'm not going to medal. Like, if Manon's beat me, then so is Lauren, and so is Caroline Hensley. And I went to the second lake at Peru, and I sat behind a tree, and I just cried because I was just so upset that I felt like I'd let them down, that I'd made them spend all this money, and I hadn't been able to bring a medal home for them. Um, and then about 5 or 10 minutes later, I hear my mum squealing, and she's coming running across the grass. And she's like, "You got silver, you got silver, you got silver." I didn't even see the other girls because I was so upset, but neither of them had gone out and beaten 42.9. So it ended up being a podium of Manon Castard winning, me in silver 10 centimetres behind, and then Caroline Hensley in third.
Okay, okay. Because I did remember when I interviewed Mano, she was very proud of that, like world junior world's title in jump. But I didn't know you got
Yeah,
second. That was close.
yeah. Yeah, and she was a really good junior jumper back then, and Caroline was amazing. Like, it was a big shock that Caroline didn't win, to be honest. I think her PB at the time was nearly the junior world record, like around 45 meters. And like,
Mm.
we're talking 13 years ago now, back in 2009. So it was yeah, I was like obviously ecstatic that I got a medal. And yeah, and then all of the Aussie parents, I think, celebrated a little bit harder than the kids, clearly.
So what was, because you said you were top 10, but maybe I'm
I don't even
catching.
think I was that. I don't even think I was that because I honestly went from like 36 or 35 meters the year before. I don't
Wow.
even know if I was top 10.
But so my guess is you went there, I guess, with no expectations, or did you have expectations? What? Because like you can make the point that I was so close to get the medal, and now I might not get it. Let me go
Yeah,
and have and
cry.
ball. But I mean, going into the worlds, like was it just let's see how it goes, let's jump far? Like, did you have a sense that you could podium? I guess.
Yeah, I think I did. Obviously, I was looking up the lists of what the girls were doing the previous year. And given that it was their winter, so the worlds were in January, so I knew that they wouldn't have probably improved much on what they did the previous year because they're training in winter. Whereas I had gone from not training at all through winter to then having a 5 week lead up into the comp. So I think me and Jason Stone at the time, and of course Ray Stokes, because he kind of had seen the girls overseas and knew what they were kind of doing, had the thought that I could definitely podium and definitely upset some people. So yeah, I guess I went into that day, especially, and if not the prelims, with the expectation that I could really upset some people. And I remember that morning waking up, and I was in the bedroom with mum, and I folded my uniform, and I folded a flag, and I put it at the bottom of my backpack just in case I needed it that day
Hmm.
for the podium. My mum saw me doing it, she didn't say a word. She just looked the other way, pretended she didn't see it, and she was just like, she knew, I think, too, that I thought that if I jumped my best ability, I had the opportunity to put the pressure on.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, and then obviously there's that facing of like, it's kind of the middle of your season, whereas it's off season for them,
Yeah.
like yeah, that's really a cool like exponential growth in a matter of a
Yeah,
couple
and
of
like
months.
I think if my worlds was in Europe or in America in the middle of their season, it would have been completely different.
Hmm.
I was just lucky that it was in Peru, so it was more of my summer than their summer. And I think it gave me that sniff, it gave me that, chance to get a medal. And then after getting that, and after being so upset by not getting it, that really fueled me to make sure I was never in that position again, that I never
Hmm.
had to rely on somebody else crashing or somebody else stuffing up for me to get a medal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see that. So I just want to do a little step back. Obviously, jumping is one of those events that, I mean, traditionally when you start water skiing, it comes a little later, right? Because
Yeah,
especially if you start at 9 or 10, you're generally tricking, slaloming a bit, and then the moment comes of okay, let's get the two skis back out of the shed and eventually jump.
yeah.
Obviously, we fast forwarded to that junior worlds, but like when did you start jumping, and was it did it become kind of clear from the start that it was like your your strong event, the event you were the most talented, or?
Um, Kind of. So that state championships where I rocked up to slalom and they didn't even know the qualification. My brother, my oldest brother Matthew, was 13 and he slaloming and tricked on the first day. And then the chief judge goes to him, "Have you jumped?" And he goes, "No, no one's ever taught us." And he goes, "Right, we'll find you some jump skis. We'll find you a jumpsuit. We'll teach you tonight. You can ski round 2 tomorrow, and then if you get your rating, we'll give you a qualification round at the end of the weekend to get you to nationals." So there was like, Waldy Procoulis, the boat
Yeah.
driver. There was a few others down in the boat at Latrobe Valley, and they suited my brother up. Had beers in the boat, whatever, took him out after the tournament, taught him how to jump. He qualified the next day for nationals, and then they gave him a ratings run. And then I rocked up. So my brother had just learnt to jump, and they go, "Who else wants to learn?" And I rocked up. I put my little steamer on, and I walked down to the dock, and they said no. They said, "You're too small. You're not allowed to jump." I was like, "Oh, well, that sucks." Like, Australia was very, very tough and big on, you're not allowed to jump when you're small. Like, you're not. You should just be tricking, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
my two brothers learnt, and then I had to wait till the next season. And I was in under 14s, and Joel Wing actually was my first jump coach. So
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to jump with him. I, absolutely ate it. Did a backflip on the first jump. And
Okay.
then second jump, I landed, and Joel was jumping up and down in the boat. I was so excited that I actually sunk after my landing because they weren't driving forwards.
Okay.
um, but yeah, so I learnt when I was 11. And then, yeah, because my brother obviously picked it up super quick, it was for us probably the most fun event.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, they were really good at it, both my brothers. So I just wanted to chase them down and beat them. So, and then it was probably, I think either that year or the following year, I'm not sure, when I was 11 or 12, my dad was looking for a coach to come and coach us rather than just the volunteer coaches at the club because none of them jumped. And he was looking at getting Emma Shears actually, and one of the locals at the club said, "Don't get Emma, get the person who taught Emma everything she knows, get Ray Stokes." So my dad got the contact details of Ray Stokes and called him up, and then flew him down to our property to stay with us for a week. And we just had 10 jump sets a day. We didn't even slalom or trick.
Right.
So that was
Right.
probably like my introduction to jump within the first year of chasing down my brothers. And then all of a sudden, you've got one of the world's best jump coaches having eyes on you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That I can see how that can basically boost your jump, well, ability, obviously, but also like your passion, your stoke for it, because your things are set in place.
Yeah, and I just learnt good habits early. Like I
Right.
was 11 and lifting a ski. Like Ray
Okay.
actually never let me go over the ramp that whole week. I actually really hated him and told Dad I never wanted him to employ him again because my brothers were allowed to go over and I wasn't. I was on these 66 little inch jump skis that were cut down because I was so small, and I jump cut for 5 or 6 sets a day. And I just kept jump cutting because hopefully at one of these sets he'll let me go over, and he never let me go over the ramp because his goal for me for that week was to teach me how to land on one ski.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I
And
just
yet,
learnt good habits early.
right, right. That makes sense. That makes sense. And you kept, like, it's funny because like a week of 6 sets a day of jump cutting for an 11-year-old, that's a tough week, man. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
you kept at it. What was it like? Was it Ray? Was it the fact that dad employed him? Was that hope of the jump? Maybe he'll
it
let me
was
go
the
over.
hope of getting to go over. It
Right,
was like,
right.
well, he told me I need to be better at cutting, be better at cutting. So I was cutting, and I was like, surely today's the day. Surely I'm going to get to go over. I want to show him that I can land jumps. I want to show him that I can land jumps.
Right.
No, cut and cut and cut.
And cut.
Yeah.
And obviously, Ray, huge part of your journey. Did it continue from there? So that kept employing him, and you would ski with him. How did that continue?
Yeah, so Dad would usually fly him down at least once a year to our house, and then sometimes we'd invite our friends and they'd come and ski with us. Other times there'd be other skiers around Geelong, so Karen Jackson and Sally and Andrew Morris were kind of getting out of the sport by then, but we would always get him in. And then it was when I was 13. Ray called us up on a Friday afternoon and he's like, Dougie, what are you and the kids doing for the weekend? Dad's like, well, it's the week before nationals. Like, we're just training. And he's like, yeah, I know that. I'm in Melbourne Airport. I'm coming down to coach Jacinta. And Dad was like, what? He goes, yep, I'm here. So Dad had to leave Geelong, drive to Melbourne, pick up Ray. And this was like the 4 days before nationals, come down and train me. So my brother was kind of a shoe-in for the team, I guess you'd say, for the France Worlds. And I was like, could I make reserve? Could I not make reserve? I was kind of on the edge. So he's like, no, she needs to jump really good at nationals to get reserve. So he came down and coached me for 4 days. And on the fourth day, he got a phone call to say that his father had had a heart attack,
Oh.
to quickly rush back to Queensland to basically say his goodbyes. And my dad raced Ray to the airport and put him on a flight, and he didn't get back in time, and he didn't get to say goodbye to his dad. So I guess like my dad took that quite personally. Like my dad blamed us. Like he blamed ourselves for Ray not getting to say goodbye to his own father. And of course, Ray never wanted us to feel like that. Like he never blamed us at all. It was his choice to come down. But we really felt, I guess, that connection.
Yeah.
After that, that my dad felt like we owed him. My dad felt like that, it was our fault type thing, that he didn't get to say goodbye. And then it was, yeah, I guess Ray saw something. Like he never told me that he saw anything, but the following season, he similar type thing didn't tell me. Rocked up at Stony Park when I was training there, and had these handmade custom little Stokes skis for me,
Ah.
and he'd hand engraved into them what weight I was allowed to be. I couldn't be heavier than, I think it was 65 kilos. And I'm not sure whether that was for me or whether that was to stop my brothers riding my skis.
Hmm.
But he drove from Bundaberg to Port Macquarie, which is probably 8, 9 hours, to deliver me these skis when I didn't even know he was coming. So I would get off my 66-inch little
Ski.
ploppers, and get onto these Stoke skis.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So he clearly saw something.
Yeah, and like obviously after he passed, my dad said that that first week when he was teaching me in the boat to single ski, to land on one off the second wake, and I was able to pick it up relatively okay because I was on 66-inch jump skis. Like I was basically on slalom ski jumping. So I was able to learn that technique and really kind of lock it in. And Ray said to Dad, one day she'll be a world. Don't tell her because it'll go to her head. But one day she'll be a world champion.
Wow.
And I didn't know that until he died, that he'd said that.
Oh,
So he
okay.
obviously saw something, but the type of coach Ray was, he was never going to let you think you were good.
Hmm. Was that his style? Like he was kind of like keeping you level-headed and hardworking?
Yeah, definitely. Like, absolutely, it was. You might be good in Australia, but you're not good overseas.
Hmm.
Well, your brothers are beating you, like lift your game type thing. It was always. It wasn't the feedback sandwich of positive, negative, positive. There was a lot of negatives, and at the start, I really struggled as a little kid because I didn't like it. I just wanted to be told that I was doing well. Um,
Right.
but looking back, it was the best thing for me. I don't I don't cope well with positive feedback. I improve more on negative feedback because I always am trying to impress people. So if I'm getting
Hmm.
positive, then what's the point in keeping working on it? Whereas copying the negative makes you want to prove them wrong. It makes you want to improve. So it was definitely more of the negative, positive, negative than positive, negative, positive.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
For me,
So
anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. At least with you, like, hey, you got this to fix. Yeah, that's okay. You also got
Yeah,
that to fix. Let's get to
yeah,
work. Yeah.
yeah.
Which, hey, when the positive comes from a coach like that, then you know it's really, really good.
Oh, yeah, huge. Like when you get a compliment, you're like,
Whoa.
oh my God, oh my God. And like my current coach, Curtis, who helped take over after Ray, he's exactly the same. And I don't know whether Ray worded him up before he passed away because he's exactly the same. Like from day one was just quite negative. And there's been times where I'll be like, I can't do this, Curtis. Like, I can't. And then all of a sudden, I'll get one positive, and I'll be like, oh gosh, let's get the phone out. Let's record this. Like, it's not going to happen again for 2 years. Like,
Right.
did you just give, and now it's like a running joke. I'm like, hang on a second. Were you just nice to me? Like, did you just give me a compliment?
Right.
So it's just they figured me out. Like it's just the way we
Hmm.
work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, look, obviously, anyone listening to this knows, well, and I want to talk about this in like later on in the interview, like the dominance you have in your event is just astonishing. But as you were growing up, you had a model right at home who historically was also extremely dominant. So Emma,
Yes.
what was she in the sport as you were growing up? Was her name, I guess, present in the Australian skiing community, especially for a young female jumper, right?
Yeah. Like unfortunately we had a crossover where I basically got into the sport and Emma left the sport.
Hmm.
So she kind of retired from international competition around 2004, and that was my first year in it. So coming
Yeah.
into it, we knew that she was awesome, and I'm pretty sure Curtis jumped at that first nationals I was at, but I don't think Emma did. I think she was injured and had just had a knee operation, so I actually never got to see her jump live. Obviously, we see videos and so forth, and Ray would talk about how good she was. He actually said that he was like, she is, and I think this instilled hard work into me too, because he would bang on about she's got no natural talent, Jacinta. She's, look at the way her knees are shaped because she's very knock-kneed. But he goes, she is the hardest worker you will see out of any of the skiers because she isn't as talented as somebody else. She works twice as hard. And I think just hearing that okay, well, she has to work hard to get to the top and stay at the top. It's not someone who's just rocked up and got all this talent and got there. So I guess I had that, instilled into me. But obviously once I started getting better at jump, looking up and seeing what she'd done in the past and her records and how she changed the sport, getting girls to be able to jump at 5.5 and these type of huge movements and accomplishments for our sport and for females, like it was pretty incredible to go, wow, like originally she's from Bendigo, like that's where I did my first comp, like she's only from an hour and a half away, like that's cool. And I remember being at primary school and we had to dress up as our favorite sporting hero, and I rocked up at my country primary school that had 80 kids in total, and I was wearing a gold jumpsuit and helmet because I was
Aha.
Emma Shears.
Ah, there you go. There you go.
So,
So there was a
that was when
presence
I
there.
was that was when I was 10 or 11. So, without probably outright saying that she, back in the day, knowing that she was my role model, when I had the choice of dressing up as anybody, I dressed up as her to go to school.
Yep, yep. So that I think that clearly answers my question of her presence. At least,
Yeah.
like you might have not seen her jump, you might have not been directly inspired by watching her ski, but certainly what she meant to the sport was
Yeah, and
there.
what she'd accomplished was, she's a legend of our sport. She just got inducted 3 weeks ago into the Australian Hall of Fame as a legend status, and
Oh
she
wow.
is.
Yeah.
She won slalom and jump back to back at two worlds. Like,
It's
it's hardly
crazy.
ever these days that you see somebody win two individual separate events at the worlds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think she also did because I had a conversation with was it with Matt? Yeah, with Matt, where we were talking about Carl Roberge, how one season he basically won the Pro Tour in slalom and in jump. Well,
Wow.
Emma, then I went back and I said, well, let's see the female. Emma did it like 3 years in a row. Like
Exactly.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Yeah. And like
And
she won Swiss, a worlds in both. Like it's crazy.
yeah. And then you get to ski with the same guy who taught her a lot of what allowed her to be such a good jumper.
Exactly. Like he had them from when they were kids until late in their career, before they went separate ways. So I was like, well, he's the best of the best, and everybody were asking, okay, who we should get the jump. They're going straight. They're going straight to the top, and they're going to get Ray.
Yeah.
So we did.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
So
cool.
I guess that's just a smart move by my dad.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know,
Well, I
Dad could have
mean,
called up any other coach, but he called up Ray.
yeah, yeah. And listen, I don't know your dad, but just for the little 30 minutes we've been speaking, your dad strikes me as a pretty sound on guy. Um, Look, obviously, you're junior, silver medal at the junior worlds. Now, there's another pretty important junior event, which are the junior Mumba. So, were you already skiing the junior Mumbas in those years? And maybe if you could speak a little bit about the importance of Mumba for an Australian skier, even at the junior level.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually have a Moomba shirt on accidentally because it's just like one of the easiest ones to find
Okay, okay.
because I have so many of them. But yeah, Moomba, like the first time I ever went and watched Moomba, I said to Dad on the way home, I want to be the girl. Dad's like, what do you mean? Because we weren't into skiing then, we were just social skiers. I was like, I want to be the girl at the top of the pyramid, the show skiers. And he goes,
Right.
no, no chance you're being that girl. You're going to be the girl that jumps the furthest off the ramp, like straight up. We hadn't
Okay.
even started tournament skiing yet, right? So junior Moomba for me, I remember my first junior Moomba. I was like 12 or 13 and I was at school for the day. And my principal comes in and she goes, Jacinta, I need to speak to you for a minute. I was like, oh, why is that? Like, we're about to sit an exam or something. She goes, well, your mum's out the front and she's got your ski gear packed. Someone's got injured and you've got to call off for junior Moomba. You're skiing in about 2 hours' time.
What?
So literally got pulled out of school. And I was under 14s at the time, so we would shorten it 52 kilometres, so
Yeah.
32 miles or whatever. So I hadn't even skied a 55 before. So I've gone up, skied junior moomba. First time ever trying 55 is on the Yarra River, right? Because I run my 52 and then I have to come back at 55. And it was just like this crazy experience that I was allowed to be pulled out of school to go to this
Right.
event. So that was like my introduction to Moomba. And then from then I started three eventing in it for the years, future years. And I think I had my first senior, I think I was in open the first time, only at like 16 or 17. Like I was quite, sometimes these days you see some 15-year-old kids or 14-year-old kids getting a go in open Moomba. But I think I was pretty late. I think I was about 17 before I got my first go, 16, 17 in open. But like as an Aussie skier, like it's just phenomenal. And especially for me, because I grew up an hour away. So, you know, for a family that hasn't wasn't able to afford to go overseas and watch me to compete, and friends not really knowing what the hell this sport is, like so many people who'd helped me along the way were able to come and watch,
Right.
gym instructors and sports psychs and that kind of thing. Like all of these people that have helped me would come and watch, and friends and so forth. So I just I it's such a great event for our sport, and like there's no other event like it in the world, and there's no other event I would say I'd prefer to win apart from world champs than Moomba Masters, because it's just incredible, and the crowds you get and what it does for our sport I think is huge. So I think if anybody is listening here and they say, I've heard it so many times, Australia is too expensive to go to, well then you're skiing for the wrong reason. If you're skiing to come to Moomba to make money, you're skiing for the wrong reason. You should be like, Moomba Masters is one of the pinnacle events of our sport, and I want that experience of skiing through the middle of a river in front of 100,000 people, then that's why you go to Moomba.
Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, certainly that's why I went.
Yeah.
I wanted the
And you
experience.
might you might not do it multiple times because you might not be able to afford to do it multiple times, but you do it once. Like if you qualify, you got to do it once in your career.
Yeah, yeah, but and I fully agree. I think it's like the most, like, you could even make the argument it's this is the event in which you feel high level athlete the most. I don't know, just the visual,
Yeah.
just the visuals of crowd, Stoke,
Yeah.
city center,
Yeah, like I
challenging
literally just
condition.
got goosebumps down my legs when you said that. Like,
You know,
especially this year after being cancelled last year because of COVID, the crowd was phenomenal. Like through the entrance gates of, including the parade and the rides, of course, 500,000 people on Sunday and 530,000 people on Monday.
wow.
500,000 people. That's like That's phenomenal. And we had, so many people coming and watching the skiing. Like you couldn't even get food. You could not even line up for food. It was that busy this year. And to think that so many of them saw us perform and put on a show for them, like, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, and I think a lot of the listeners might not know, right? The Mumbai is a festival. Like it could be compared, I guess, to a carnival of some sort. It is like a
Yeah.
vacation, ends on a date which is Monday instead of Tuesday, but it's a big festival. So I guess that's why I guess what I was aiming at when I said being an Australian skier, because if you weren't a skier, you still would know about the Moomba Festival. You might still go to the Moomba Festival with some friends, but now you are an athlete competing in it. So I guess that has got to take a higher meaning for an Australian skier than say an Italian skier or an American skier.
Yeah, like ultimate goal coming into being, doing like starting to try and get into pro events would be first and foremost, let's qualify for Moomba. And hell, like imagine if I won, imagine if I'm the Aussie who won the Aussie event. Like and you ask, every kid, it's a dream of theirs to be able to stand on the dock at Moomba. We do hold it up on a pedestal pretty high in the Australian skiing community because we all just love it so much and love that opportunity to ski for our country on an international stage, but also in our home backyard. And being Victoria, being my home state, and my hometown only being an hour away, it felt extra special. And I guess with that, a little bit of extra pressure to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do well. And to be honest, whenever anybody asks me, like, over the last 10 years, what's been your favorite win? It is like, I don't even think twice. It's the 2011 Moomba Masters. Like, my first ever Moomba as an open skier, having Ray there, winning the event when nobody knew who I was. Like, that, like, I will never forget that moment of that Moomba because that was so special.
Well, tell us the story, the lead up to it, the preparation.
I guess the lead up started like 4 months earlier. I left school and I relocated to Stony Park. So I was
Mm-hmm.
living in a shed with five other coaches and blokes, and I was like the ski school nanny slash boat driver. Never really driven a boat in my life much. So they had to teach me how to drive the boat, and I was looking after Jason Stone's two little kids as like the nanny, just to afford to be able to train.
Yeah.
And then Ray came down for coaching in January, and I'd been on the phone to him quite a bit, and he was telling me that he wasn't feeling well, and he'd been feeling quite off. Anyway, he goes, "Oh, Rabbit, I think there's something wrong with me. Like, I was in New Zealand last week and I was walking up a hill, and Ed Donald, who's at the time, Ed was quite a large bloke, wasn't even puffed at the top of the hill, and I was like, that's not right." So I knew he was sick, and we knew he was sick, but we didn't know what. And then he coached me for a jump set, and he got a phone call from the hospital and got called into the hospital. So we went into the hospital, and I heard whispers around the lake that afternoon. Ray's got cancer, Ray's got cancer, and I was trying to block it out. I was just, driving the boat, doing my work. I'm like, no, it can't be. Like, it can't be, it can't be. Anyway, he got back to the lake and called me into his cabin and sat me down and told me he had been given 6 weeks to live, that he had tumours all through him, that it was melanoma. No, sorry, I lied. The first day they told him 6 months. So he's like, of course, his head hasn't gone to, oh my God, I'm dying. His head has gone to, don't worry, Rabbit, that gives me 6 months. I'll make 2 to 3 sets of skis for you. I'll go back to Bundaberg. I'll make the skis and you'll have plenty of skis. Like, that was his conversation with me. Not, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. It was, don't worry, I've got 6 months. I'm going to make plenty of skis. Right? And then the
Wow.
next day when he went back for further CT scans and PET scans and came back to the lake, and they were like, you don't have 6 months. You have about 6 weeks. So that was January 23rd. Now, if you calculate about 6 weeks from then, that's the
That's
week of
Moomba.
Moomba.
That's Moomba.
Yeah. So for the rest of the summer, I was coached by Chris Wharton, and I have to give a massive shout out to Chris Wharton.
Yeah.
because he got me from jumping about 46, 47 meters from the year before. I'd taken 9 months off the sport to complete my high school, so I hadn't skied in 9 months. And he got me from about 46, 47 meters. And at the end of that season, 54.8 I jumped. So he had a
Wow.
huge influence that year. So he coached me every day. Spoke to Ray beforehand, knew what we were working on, and coached me every day. And I went to Moomba at that 6 week mark when Ray was technically meant to be, on death row. And he came down and initially in a wheelchair. The Peter MacCallum Cancer Clinic in Melbourne had filled him up with about 8 bags of blood. So he looked quite chipper to most people on the bank, but he was very, very sick. And obviously I was at 5 foot because I skied juniors. I skied juniors on the Wednesday, Thursday, and won juniors at 51 5 foot. I think it went 48.8 meters or 48.4 meters. And then I knew,
Wow.
oh gosh, if I can go that far at 51 5 foot, like I reckon 50 could podium. Like if I bump the speed up here, I reckon 50 could podium. So we went 54 for the weekend and qualified. I don't know if I was top seed, but I was definitely near the end of the order. But of course, I was 5 foot. So on finals day, I had to go first.
Right.
Right. So I've gone out there and I had nothing to lose. At that time, I looked it up the other week actually. I was 18th in the world rankings. And so I've gone out there and I jumped 52.7. And I
Solid.
just stood there and I stood there with Ray and my parents and we watched Annie Samad go out, Marianne Matthew go out, all of these top level jumpers go out. And then it got to Natalia Bendakova and she didn't beat the score. And we were like, holy crap, like you've won. Like it was once again that kind of similar Peru incident where I just had to put the score on the board and sit and wait. And the Moomba Masters organisers were fabulous. Like they put me in the boat, they did a lap of honour up and down the crowd, and they let Ray in the boat with me. So it was me and Ray with his skis doing a lap of the river in front of the crowd. After me just jumping in open as a junior and jumping what was I think a PB at the time or at Moomba to jump a PB to win the event. So like nothing I don't think like will ever like that was an awesome weekend and an awesome jump and a awesome event. Like I don't think I can beat it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
it's
remember
tough.
I remember like so in jump we don't often get to sit in the water between jumps. We often just spin. But at Moomba you have to drop.
Right.
And I remember sitting in the water and the current's taking me and I'm drifting down. And I said to myself, I said to the boat driver, I think it was Jody Seals, and I said, this is the last time Ray's going to see me jump. Like, this is the last jump. I have to land on one ski. I have to do his turn because I need him to die seeing it. And
Yeah.
I jumped 2 meters further and it was luckily enough. But yeah, I remember talking myself into it being like, he will never see you again, ski.
Wow. What a thought. What a thought.
Yeah.
And
And that's what I mean.
as
Like, it does crazy things to you. And that motivation, like, there was nothing that was going to change that. There was nothing that was going to stop me. Like, it was pretty an unstoppable force that weekend, I guess.
well, I mean, I I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
What were the moments after? Did you get to spend some time with him after that?
Yeah. So I actually, that year, like, I didn't know what pro skiing really meant. But because I won Moomba, like I'd taken the year off uni, like just in case I could somehow squeeze my way onto like the doing a couple of events. So after Moomba got you invited to US Masters, but then we had the whole you have to go 5.5.
Right.
So Ray went back to hospital, I went back to Stony Park, and I went out the front 3 times, 3 days in a row.
Ouch.
Because I couldn't tolerate with my technique. I couldn't tolerate 5.5. So it was a lot of video coaching. Ray was obviously, invested into to seeing me succeed for that year. So I, we dropped it down, and it went up like, a centimetre or two a day, just little increments over 2.5 weeks. I then went to the Aussie Nationals and jumped 54.8 and thought, oh gosh, like I've got, at the time, the Aussie record was 55.3 being Emma's.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, like that's close. Like I could probably get there soon. So I'd already organised earlier in the year to go and live with Ray in America, but obviously that had all changed with Ray being sick. So Ray got on the phone to Tom and Will Asher and sent me to their house because that's where he would have been based if he was going to be there.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really know either of them. I just knew that Will Asher was this amazing slalom skier and like pretty good jumper in the day
Right.
before he quit. And I was like, oh, I can't live with him. Like, oh my God, I can't do this type thing. And June Fladbog at the time was out in Australia looking after Ray. So I went over before US Masters, and I lived with Tom and Will training at Sawmill Lake, before going to my first Masters. So for that year, like obviously I kept him, I was in and out of being overseas. And whenever I was back in Geelong, Ray was only in hospital like an hour's drive away. So
Wow.
I would be, at the hospital most days in between uni classes.
Yeah.
I did uni in Melbourne, so on my lunch break, I'd go over and sit with him at the bedside at his hospital bed, or I'd just visit him on weekends and so forth. Yeah, until it was time to say goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, during your first, I guess, had you been in the US before that trip, or was it your first time?
Yeah, so I went the following year for junior US Masters. I was invited the 2 years prior, but my dad was like, Rabbit, they call me Rabbit, and he's like, you're not good enough to make a podium, and therefore at US Masters, you're only going to get one round. So I'm not spending the money. I can't afford to send you. So get better, and I'll send you in your last year when you can win it. So I went the year before and I stayed up at DeLand, at Les Todd's Lake,
Yeah.
with Ray, Maria Vimprandyatseva, Tom, and myself in a little house. Charlotte Wharton, Chris Wharton came and went, and we skied, yeah, behind the Masters boat at DeLand for 2 weeks before 2 to 3 weeks before going to the US Masters. So I'd been in America once for 2.5 weeks with Ray, but I've never been by myself, and I'd never been to like the Florida area where everybody kind of bases themselves.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty big step for me, and new environment. So yeah, I had to learn pretty quickly when my skis got broken on the flight on the way over. Just the back got smashed in, and Will was going to fix them for me. And it was a pretty big, all right, step up your game, when he's like, here's the key to my truck. You need to drive to this shop and buy this material for me. I was like, okay.
Yeah, so the first time you went with Ray, but the second time, although it was more of like a grown-up trip with the Ashers, it was still within Ray's
Oh yeah.
channels and recommendations, and like his
Yeah,
taste.
it was still him looking over me. And unfortunately, about the third event in, no, maybe even the second event in for when I was there, my Stokes snapped in half. So for the rest of the year, my first year in America, my first year on the tour, and I didn't have skis. So I jumped on my May Yepson's
Yeah.
Stokes at LA Night Jam in the round two after mine broke in round one. At the following event in California, um, at, I jumped in, it was Steve Garcia put on an event in California, and I jumped on one of my Stokes and Michaela Hawes Goodman, different skis. And then the following weekend, I jumped on Josh Bryant, oh, a couple of weekends later, I jumped on Josh Bryant's Goodman's at Malibu Open. And then D3 wanted to sponsor me, so I tried D3s and skied on them at Worlds. And then at that point, Mum drove my brother's Connolly's to Melbourne to the bedside of Ray in hospital for him to inspect them
Wow.
to see if they were going to be good enough for me to ski on. And then my mum and dad freighted over my brother's skis for me to ski under 21 Worlds on.
So
So
a
I
struggle
skied
of
on like,
struggling here in terms of materials.
Like I didn't know anyone. Like I didn't know Ron Goodman. I didn't know D3. I was just this punk little Aussie who could jump, but all of a sudden my coach was dying. My manufacturer of my skis were dying. I didn't have any other Stokes. Like I didn't have anything. Like,
Yeah.
and I remember sleeping that night at LA Night Jam with the broken ski in my bed because Ray used to go on and on about his secret, design, and he didn't want anybody seeing the inside of the ski. And I've just snapped one in half mid competition. So I didn't want people to see the inside of it. So I slept with it in my bed.
Wow. That's cool. That's cool. So
It's just funny.
look, um, so that was like 2011,
Yes,
2012 period.
2011.
Yeah, 2011. Now, um, when is the last time that you lost or you didn't win? Okay, you didn't win a jump tournament that you entered
I got silver at the 2013 Moomba Masters,
behind.
Youth Alarmy.
Ah, okay. So
So,
that's the last time you didn't win a jump tournament.
yeah.
It's 9 years.
So in 2011, me and Natty nearly went win loss, win loss, win loss.
Okay.
So I won Moomba, she won US Masters, she won California. No, I won LA Night Jam, she won California. I won King of Darkness, she won Worlds, and she won Malibu Open, I think. So it was kind of like win loss, 2011. 2012, I broke my ankle. Um, and and when I came back, I just didn't, it just wasn't there as well. Like Ray had died, I broke my skis. It was three things at once within 6 weeks. Broke another set of skis. Ray had died, and I broke my ankle. And then when I got back for the last half of the season, like Natty was breaking world records. She was going 190, 192, and I just wasn't there. And then 2013, Natty got injured and couldn't come to Moomba. And it was the best and worst thing that's ever happened to me. Because to be honest, I was like, oh, right, okay, like, don't have to, like, I won't have to go as far to try and win. Now, that's a very up yourself comment, and it's the best comment I've ever made to myself in my life because I've never said it again. And I took it for granted that the number one in the world wasn't going to be there and didn't expect or that I actually did have to jump better. And I jumped terrible. I think I jumped 50 meters at Moomba. And like my PB was 54. Like I deserved to lose that event. And it's because I believe I got too comfortable. And I've never been comfortable since. Because I've learned that the minute you doubt the competition is the minute you lose yourself. So it was the best and worst thing for me. Obviously, I was distraught because once again, all my family's there watching. I was assumed I was, with Natty out, I was ranked second in the world. Like you were the top dog, you're meant to win, and I didn't. So we went to Perth the next week and had a World Cup stop in Mandurah, which I was able to win, and then we had Perth night jump, the following weekend, which I was able to win. And then from there, it was, on to US Masters and so forth.
Yeah, and so forth. And 9 years later, you haven't lost a tournament you've entered. I mean, you want to talk because listen, just to be clear, a lot of the people that listen to the Water Ski podcast are fans of the sport, amateurs, so they might be more familiar with some of the men's slalom dominance or Regina in women's slalom, but this fares nothing compared to 9 years of not losing an event. So I have so many questions, right? The first one is, have you been able not to doubt the competition since?
No, I think, like I said, when I read a book about motivation and about competing, and yeah, one of the big like sticking points was as soon as you believe you're better than your competition is when you've already lost the event. So I never go to an event and believe I'm going to win or believe that nobody, like I'm not going to get pushed. Because the minute you don't think that is the minute where you switch off and you make a mistake and then you do lose. So I always go to an event knowing that I still have to jump well and I have to get my technique right to be able to get that jump to win. Um, and I've always trying to force that into my head. Like I was even this year, like I was so nervous at Malibu Open this year and so nervous at Worlds. More nervous than I'd probably been in the last years prior because I think I was building that pressure up on myself even more to make sure I got into that zone. So it's of course there's a level of you know not comfort, but going into prelims, like I know I can qualify for finals and I know it's about me getting my setup and getting my position for the finals. But I think, yeah, the minute you start to doubt your competition and not think that somebody's going to beat you is the minute you'll lose it,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
really hard, right? For 9 years, you've got to tell yourself that. For 9 years, you've got to stand on the dock and be like, you're going to get beaten today. Go out there and perform. Like you have to perform and put that pressure on yourself. Like, yeah, it's obviously had its trying moments and obviously had its testing moments as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm sure. I mean, in 9 years of competition is a lot of years, unbelievable. And that tells me that certainly when you learn a lesson, you tend to not forget it because what
Yeah,
that as you called it, that mistake in 2012. I mean, sounds like you haven't made it since.
yeah, but it was the best thing for me. And like Yuta jumped amazing. Like she deserved to win. Like she
Yeah,
jumped, I think 52, 53 meters on the Yarrow. That's huge. Like
yeah,
hands down, not discrediting Yuta at all. She deserved to win. She was the better jumper. And at the time we were great friends. So after obviously, I've slapped myself together and pulled my self together. I, definitely went and congratulated her, and she deserved it 100%. It's just, it was a really, 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 really good learning lesson for me.
yeah.
And then I started to win a few in a row, and then people started being like, oh, well, how many have you won in a row? And what's the record for wins in a row? And is there a record for wins in a row? And yeah, then it started coming into this, oh, well, you've got to chase down Dana Maple because she's won 39 in a row. And, can you go 5 year Moomba champion or 5 years Masters in a row? Or can you go 10? Like all of these other kind of little goals started
Hmm.
snowballing as a result of starting to win a lot of events in a row.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna guess that you crushed all of those by now.
Well, no, it took me a long time. Like, I actually only think I've beaten Dana's record like a few tournaments ago because Dana's record is 39 professional wins in a row. Now, she did that across about 2.5 seasons, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, our sport doesn't have as many events anymore. And then we had the COVID interruption of no events for me personally because I was locked in Australia. Um, so it
Right.
has taken me like a lot longer to chase that down. But yeah, her record was 39 in a row.
And hers was in jump.
Yes,
Okay. Wow.
yes, I believe.
Yeah, that's pretty strong.
Because
Um,
like otherwise, you go through the Emma period, and Emma had Angeliki,
yeah.
for a period of time, and then there was June that came in at the end of Emma's time, but then Natty came in towards the end of June's time. Like there's never really been, Elena Milikova at the start of Emma's time. They both of them jumped world records back to back at the same event.
Yeah.
Emma held the record for 2 minutes, and then Elena went and beat it. So there's always been kind of a couple, and that's the same with me with Natty, right? So Natty was at the top, and we were kind of win loss together, and then Natty broke the world record, and I was trying to chase the world record down. So there's always been for the last 15, 20 years, kind of two girls that have been battling it out at the top.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. And then obviously with the decrease of number of events per year, that explains why it took you slightly longer than Dina,
Just a few more years.
a few more years. Um, Now, I guess out of the worlds that you've won, one that sticks more than others, like one that you remember with more,
That
joy.
that's a really tough one because every single one of them hold a different place in my heart. So obviously, my first one, Emma had come out of retirement and was there slaloming. So I had her there to coach me, and I had her there to spot for me. And the same thing, that was the first year, 2013, that I'd actually started, getting some wins in a row. So it was not like a guarantee. You know, I wasn't even probably top dog because, you know, Natty was back skiing and she was the world record holder. Um, so for me, that was a pretty amazing accomplishment to be able to win my first world championships and to have my family there. So my mum and dad were there. My dad jumped in the water and swam out to me. And the first thing he said to me was, Ray told me you would do it and you did it. He would be so proud. Like, nothing about dad being proud. It was like, Ray told me you would do it when you were 11. You've done it. You know, he would be so proud type thing. So that whole day was really quite special. Also, for the point of like in my turn on my last jump, I literally said to myself, I'm like, you're either going to hospital or you're winning a world champs. Like I was on the corner and I was either going out the front or kicking it and getting a big jump in and being able to win. So that one being the first is obviously super special. Mexico was good, but the next best would probably be Paris because I actually got a bronze in overall. And I
There
valued
you
that
go.
I valued that bronze in overall nearly more than I valued the gold in jump
Hmm.
because to be able to perform in three events across the weekend, that was yeah for me that was one of the best world's moments and made more special by the fact that Josh Bryant also got a medal. So the two of us, and we'd grown up training and skiing together. So that was a pretty special worlds for the overall, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, of course.
perspective. And then this year, I thought I'd gone 200 on the last. Like when I got the rewrite at this year's Worlds, and I went out there and I just wanted to get one jump together to prove how far I'd been going in training. And I landed, and I felt like I'd landed a lot further down the lake than I did the previous weekend at Jack's when I went 195. And I was like, that's it. So I think that getting that feeling, because technically speaking, that was probably the best turn I've ever done in a competition.
That
So
that last
yeah,
rewrite at Worlds.
that last reride. So to put that all together at a world champs, I was super stoked with my performance for myself, for my technique. Paris, I was super impressed with my ability for overall, and obviously Chile, I was super impressed that I could hold it together and get my first worlds. So yeah, three out of
Wow.
the five have been up there, and don't get me wrong, the other two are still up there, but they probably just don't have as much emotion into them as the other three.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, all for different reasons, they stick out as being a little special. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you can, because they are for three completely different reasons. Like, I don't think you can, really, really separate them.